Jonathan Manthorpe, our guest. He's a foreign correspondent, international reporter. He writes a column in the Vancouver Sun. He writes a blog, daily blog.
Yeah, my columns go up there every day, and I do podcast as well.
You do?
Oh,
well, you're very wired. But very interesting what you're saying about the world being so wired today. Any kind of skirmish at Tiananmen Square.
Yeah.
What happened in Berlin, Prague.
Yeah, yeah.
Today would be perhaps.
Well,
it's definitely covered differently.
It's even more so today because of social media as well, and that every cell phone is a TV network.
Sure,
today.
and citizen journalists who don't know what they're talking about sometimes.
It has huge dangers. I mean, we saw in Tunisia, and we've seen certainly in the first few days here in Egypt, the ability to rally crowds using text messaging. We've seen the same in China in the last few years as well. And I mean, the China situation is a bit off track, but it's quite interesting because the authorities in China have started using text messaging themselves to deal with demonstrations. There was a case a couple of years ago where protesters wanted to boycott Japanese goods. And so the government got text messaging all the demonstrators saying, look, don't do this, boys, because pretty well all Japanese goods are made in China these days, and it'll be destroying our own job.
But in one of your columns this week, you asked, are the glory days of dictators drawing to a close?
Yeah.
Do you see that happening?
Well, one hopes so, and that I think is the prospect that a lot of people are reading into this, if you like, domino effect of leading off from Tunisia. And I think one of the hopeful things and one of the positive things one has to see in these chain of demonstrations is the number of non-secular urban middle-class people who are taking part. We've had it drummed into our heads over the decades that the alternative to the autocrats, to the dictators, is the kind of theocratic dictatorship that we see in Iran. Well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe a new middle way of globalized Arabs is evolving that will impose or will create a new form of democracy that is suitable for the Middle East.
Which is not about religion.
Which is not about religion and is not about the army. Yeah.
So when we hear domino effect mentioned that this turmoil will affect Sudan, Algeria, Tunisia, Yemen, Syria.
Yeah. Well, the common denominator in all those places that you've named is that there was already unrest underway. And the domino effect of Tunisia seems to have been that it reignited fires that were already smoldering. And we've had in Jordan, for example, King Abdullah very, very promptly fired his old government, which had been the target of protests in the last few months, appointed a new prime minister with a clear mandate to produce a democratic reform program. We've had Bashar Assad in Syria, who's said he's going to speed up the economic and political reform process, which was already underway.
So how does this affect a poorer country like Yemen?
Well, Yemen has been in a rotten state for a long time. President Salih there has been in power even longer than Mubarak's 30 years. He's been there 32 years. He's got a pretty frail country at the best of times. There's a separatist uprising in the south, which has been going on for quite a long time. And it's a Sunni Muslim country, and he's got a pocket of Shia Muslims up in the north who are also mounting their own insurrection. And of course, this is the family heartland of Osama bin Laden and a lot of the Al-Qaeda people who are streaming home from to avoid the getting blown up in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And a fair bit of Al-Qaeda's network now is being run out of the tribal areas of Yemen. So this is not a nice place to run at the best of times.
But could it turn into the next Afghanistan?
Well, or it could turn into the next Somalia, which just totally failed state. Which is, and the links between Somalia and Yemen are long and ancient.
Now, you mentioned there could be a few Al-Qaeda leaks to the Muslim Brotherhood. How connected?
I don't think they're very connected these days. Now, there are former members of the Muslim Brotherhood who were very, very senior in Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda takes a lot of its sort of religious, theocratic basis from the Brotherhood's interpretation of Islamic law.
Do you expect Osama bin Laden to pop up once again with a little speech about I had something to do with Egypt, I have something to do with this?
He might well do. He might well. It'll be hard for him to resist. I mean, we've already had Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran applauding the uprising today and saying that this is going to be the beginning of the creation of a theocratic state in Egypt. It's nonsense, but it's...
Right. What should Canada do?
Not much Canada can do. I don't think we have really much influence in this situation at all. We can just watch and wait. I don't think there's anything we can say or do that's really is going to have any effect.
Any other country that has more? The
Well,
United
the US,
States,
the
of
US
course.
is the main one, and the Europeans as well. I mean, the Europeans collectively, as the European Union, they have some influence. But you have to be. I think you have to think out very, very clearly what you want to happen. If things go wrong in Egypt, you can see Israel totally isolated in the Middle East. Egypt has been a very, very important partner with Israel, particularly in dealing with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. People forget that the blockade of Gaza is not just by Israel, it's also by Egypt. And this has been a very, very important matter in dealings with the Palestinians and dealings with Hamas.
So what can Israel do? Who can Israel influence in this skirmish?
The U.S. I mean, I think that the Israel has to rely on the U.S. to hold its interests there. For Israel to do anything overt is going to distort the picture and create far more problems than they'll solve. So the Israelis are purposefully and rightly keeping very quiet at this point.
And in the meantime, Mubarak blaming the media, which is a bit spurious. I mean,
it is.
It's about much deeper things.
Oh, of course it is.
Than
of course
the
it
reportage.
is. And we're an easy target when these things happen. And it doesn't only happen it happens in nice democracies like our own. It's not just in nasty authoritarian regimes.
Why did the military not take a harder line yesterday? Or it seemed they didn't. I don't know. I wasn't there. But it seemed they set back a little and let them throw stones and Molotov cocktails.
Yeah.
Is that because Mubarak's orchestrating, Mubarak thugs, should I even use the term thugs, but Mubarak-driven?
I think that there was perhaps an effort by Mubarak's supporters to play to that fear that he has raised, that, après voir le déluge, if he goes, that there will be mayhem and civil war. And the position of the army is interesting because this is fundamentally a military regime in Egypt. All the leaders have come from the army, all the people in the government come from the army, but the army is very popular with the people. We've seen that on the streets, even though the demonstrators and the army are getting on well. I think that the army was probably under pressure from its own leadership and from Mubarak to let loose these thugs, as you say.
Why do you think El-Baradei left Austria, left the atomic energy program to come back to Egypt? Is there something we don't know? He's a Nobel laureate.
Well, he resigned from the IAEA a few years ago now, and he's living in Europe. But the end of 2009, he first flew back to Egypt and proclaimed that he was going to be a candidate. I think about 1,000 people met him at the airport. When he went back again last week, it was really only journalists met him at the airport. He's not a popular guy. He's seen as an opportunist. I don't think he has much of a hope of getting anywhere in an election.
Well, Foreign Affairs critic Bob Rae, the Honorable Bob Rae, was here last week, and he said, in his opinion, Mr. Baradei should quiet down.
Well, I don't think anybody's listening anyway, so I don't think it makes much
so
difference. There's another guy who is a possible candidate, and his name is Amr Moussa. He's the head of the Arab League at the moment. He's a very urbane character. He would make a presentable candidate, opposition candidate for the presidency.
So what is the best case scenario for Israel, for the West? in the next few weeks.
Yeah, the best case scenario is that probably Mubarak goes before September, that there is a transitional government, probably with Suleiman in charge. Suleiman has very close links with Israel, and that prepares for free and fair presidential elections in September. That's the best case scenario.
And many of the reporters yesterday were saying they have never seen violence that is so relentless, going on so long. They've been to other demonstrations and they've seen like 2 hours of fire and violence, and then it settles down, then it starts again. But this, they said, was going like 24/7 practically.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been there, so these things can keep going for a long time. But I would. This has gone up and down too. We've had days of peace. Mostly, it's been quite a carnival atmosphere there.
Yes, and there's no rule book. Is the problem for this? And I would think the United States must stand for freedom and democracy. And who is pumping that? Who's taking that position?
Well, that seems to be coming from Obama himself. But I'm not sure how good advice he's getting on that. I really think he's got out a bit ahead of the train, and it may come back to bite him if he's not careful.
Nice to see you again. I'll be reading dispatches.
Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan Manthorpe.